up your name completely. It's Adenaan Hardien from Cadiz Asset Management. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, before we get into the meat and bones of the budget, I just wanted to ask you, we have the main budget that's delivered in February, and we have the mini budget that's delivered now in October. What's the difference and what's the significance of the midterm budget?
Well, in theory, the mini budget is supposed to be a non-event. A non-event in the sense that the Minister provides us some update on their fiscal projections, flags potential changes on the fiscal front that may be announced at the time of the main budget. But I think this time around, as indeed has been the case for the last couple of years, I think given the concerns around fiscal sustainability, there is a bit more focus on what he has to say in this mini budget.
Now, obviously, one of the issues, or a couple of issues that are in close focus is the twin deficits. That is the budget deficit that we have and our current account deficit. Correct. But focusing more on the budget deficit, are your expectations that it will widen? And if it does widen in terms of the Minister's projections, does that mean an automatic downgrade for South Africa?
I think the consensus is that there will be some deterioration, so that the Minister may announce a slightly bigger deficit than had been projected at the time of the budget. Perhaps not as big as I think some in the market is expecting. But be that as it may, I think by and large that the budget deficit is wider than had been anticipated, I think is largely already acknowledged. Even by the ratings agencies. I think the concerns that the ratings agencies have raised are more longer-term concerns, and certainly I don't expect the Minister to be able to fully allay those concerns in the mini budget. It's more of a long-term thing that will keep on hanging over our heads over the next couple of years.
Now, in terms of addressing the budget deficit, even if it's a long-term strategy, in an ideal world, what needs to happen for us to get that narrowed down?
Well, two things. The one is that we need to grow our revenue sources. And there the indications are that South Africans, especially South African consumers, are already quite burdened in terms of their tax contributions. The other would be to rein in expenditure, and that again is a gradual process given the kind of demands that is made on the fiscus, especially given South Africa's quite big socio-economic challenges.
Now, government has many constituents that it needs to serve, but one of those key constituents are its alliance partners. And it seems as though when it comes to significant policy like your National Development Plan, and then you've got strands like your employment tax incentive, things like that, it seems as though they always have to please them, in order to just be able to survive politically, but they then don't get on with doing the job of delivering for the economy. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think given how fundamental these issues are, it's perhaps right that there should be tensions and there should be debate. But what we certainly caution is that in order for government to continue doing what it's doing, it needs to maintain the confidence of investors that essentially have to fund the shortfall that government currently experiences. And unfortunately, there are some tough requirements that they would like to see that isn't always popular when it comes to alliance partners. So it's a juggling act that the government and indeed the Minister would have to continue doing.
It seems as though the employment tax initiative is one of them. It seems as though they're going to drive that through regardless of COSATU's protests.
Although it's not called what it was initially intended, but that certainly looks like it is going ahead. Our expectation is that we'll see it early next year. And that would be one of the things that gives me confidence that even with an election around the corner, that the government is doing some of the hard things that it needs to do in order to actually get job creation going in this economy.
Every year, the Minister of Finance talks about these massive numbers in terms of infrastructure development. But when you look at the quarterly bulletin that's released by the Reserve Bank, you see that government investment in capital expenditure is not really hiking. What are your thoughts there? Is government spending or is it not spending?
Well, it is a big amount if you look at what they plan to spend over the next 3 or indeed the next 5 years. And if you look at the quarterly figures, obviously the figures would be lower. But having said that, the one thing that has been disappointing this year is that there has been some slippage as far as the government's ability to continue with those infrastructure expenditures. The one thing that stands out is the disruptions that we had at the Medupi power station earlier this year, which essentially set back that project by quite a number of months.
All right. Thanks very much, Adenaan. That's where we're going to have to leave it. Thank you for your time. That was Adenaan Hardien. He's from Cadiz Asset Management. It's back to you, Elvis.